James, are you there?
I am. I've got a very weak signal, apparently. Shall we try and start?
Let's try and start. Okay. So, hello and welcome to the third episode of With For About 2020. It's the annual conference of Heart of Glass, and we're over the second difficult album. So, I'm just going to explain what's going to happen today. So, this is our introduction bit, and we will try to make it brief. We've got 8 films and audio pieces, and before each film we'll introduce it, and after each film then we'll both have a little chat about what we've just watched, and we'll also do a few shout outs, and the show will last about 2.5 hours, we think. I am Cecilia and I am co-curator and presenter of this online conference. And I've just heard that James is gone. Okay, so as you can imagine, we're broadcasting live from our respective places of work. Mine is in my home and James is in his studio. He's going to try and get back to us as soon as he can. So James, aka the vacuum cleaner, is my co-curator and presenter. We also wanted to say a big welcome on behalf of Heart of Glass team. So in case you don't know them, the Heart of Glass are an agency for collaborative and social arts practice, and they're based in St Helens in Merseyside. And With For About is their annual conference that James and I are curating and hosting this year. And we've turned it into a slow online conference. So still no James. This is a bit where like James and me would usually check in about how we're doing, and just thinking about what we've been processing and experiencing this week. So we just wanted to welcome back anyone who has been watching the previous 2 episodes of With For About, and also a big hello to all our new viewers. So if you're here for the first time, then please do take a moment to read the Safer Spaces boundaries. So there's a big button below with the Safer Spaces boundaries, and you can also watch all of the previous episodes by looking at the previous episodes button. So as we say every week, but it's also definitely worth repeating. Please take care of yourselves when you're watching, and do give a pause if you need to. Get a glass of water or take a break, or reach out if you need to. You can use the chat function during the YouTube stream. All you need to do is log into a Google account, and you'll be able to watch the live stream and comment along. If you want to share thoughts, then please do that with us. You can either share on the YouTube chat, or there's also a button for this on the website, which is called Share Your Thoughts. So our website, in case you're just watching on YouTube, is withforabout.com. So let's see, where's James? Is ready to join. Here he is. How's it going, James?
I love the internet in my studio. It's amazing. Where did you get up to?
We have just been talking about the chat function.
Oh, really?
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
And I was just about to do the next part, which is the content warning. So I was just about to say that this week we have work that explores both death from COVID as well as racism, including racist attacks, anti-Blackness and colonialism, and the HIV pandemic and ableism. So if there are any severe technical issues with the broadcast itself, then please click the aside from James, please click the Twitter logo which you can find above this video. And so that will bring you to the Twitter feed, where instructions will appear. If you're following on social media, you can follow along all of our latest on the hashtag, which is with4about2020. I've done all the housekeeping, James.
Thank you.
Social reproduction, isn't it?
Shall we see some art?
Let's do that. What's
Okay.
first?
Our first contributor today is not an artist, but a healthcare worker. So Dr. Emma Young is a senior doctor in...
Okay, I will carry on. It seems like the internet is not our friend today. So Emma Young is a senior doctor in the A&E department at Newham Hospital in East London. And James interviewed Emma 10 days ago about the experiences that her and her team and the community that use the hospital have been having during COVID. So we just needed to warn you that this film contains material about deaths from COVID that some people might find upsetting. Please cue the video, Carl. Thanks.
My name's Emma Young and I'm a consultant in emergency medicine, which means that I work as a doctor in an accident emergency department, and I work partly in Newham in East London and partly at the Royal London, also in East London, two very different hospitals in our region. So Newham is one of the poorest boroughs in the UK. It has a very unusual population because it's one of the youngest populations with the highest birth rate in the UK, and it has very poor housing. It has, I can't think of another word than ghettoisation, in that you've created a borough where there are poor opportunities for jobs, etc., where there is no infrastructure for that. There's poor transport infrastructure, surrounded by some very wealthy areas, and on the edge of it the Olympic Park. It actually, most of the Olympic Park is in the borough of Newham. And it's got not really yet had gentrification, and with that you have all the issues about poverty. So they were already standing. You had health inequalities over and above anywhere that I've ever worked. And you have housing issues that mean you've got large groups of people who are living in houses together, and that's partly cultural and partly actually just there's nowhere else to live. And so the effects we knew were going to be greater. We already had those health inequalities. We already had people with people who are 40 with diseases you expect in 70-year-olds. The stark reality is it's got the highest death rate in the UK. That's the kind of bottom line of this, and the reasons for that are complex, and that's one of now, however far we are down the line, that's what we're looking at and thinking about. So we had to reorganise the entire hospital from beginning to end. Every single bit of it had to be reorganised, and we had to do it while we were continuing to work. So continuing to provide a service throughout. There's no point at which we closed, and that meant, and we were very concerned and scared about that notion that we would be overrun with so many patients we couldn't look after them. So there was a process of trying to make sure that didn't happen, and actually that was really successful in many ways. So we made sure that the kind of don't come unless you need to was a message that everyone needed to put out. In Newham, we think that message went out in a way that's been really difficult for our population, and we actually think people didn't come who should have come, and that part of the death rate is related to people not coming to hospital, and when they came it was too late. And that's been really difficult to bear. When it became apparent that people weren't coming, we were dropping to having only 100 patients a day coming to the emergency department, all of whom were incredibly sick, not only with COVID but with other things. The ways in which the NHS tried to protect services has a greater effect on people who don't have a confidence in interacting with the services, don't have transport, so they don't drive in, they're coming by ambulance only. and ambulance and the London Ambulance Service are trying to keep people at home, which was completely understandable, but that we think that adversely affected our population, or we're worried about that and we're looking at that, and that they felt they shouldn't come in, and that when they use 111, that service is absolutely English based, and culturally, instinctively it feels like it has an unconscious bias in it. The weird thing for us, all of us, I think, and I'm not just speaking for me, is that it wasn't what we thought it was going to be. We thought we were going to be overrun, that there would be people dying in the corridors, that we wouldn't have enough ventilators, that we wouldn't have enough CPAP, the breathing, that we wouldn't have enough space, because we were running at 99% capacity at hospital before, and it was normal to have people in the corridors of A&E. That's not what happened. What happened was something much more complicated, which was that people didn't come in, and that when they came in, they were very, very sick, which we knew they would be, but they were younger than we thought they were going to be, and we were. That picture was something different from what we expected.
Yeah.
What we thought as we watched what happened from Italy, and we listened, like I remember listening to that in February, and we were scared, but we were scared rightly, because we thought we wouldn't have the resources, and that was real. We needed to protect the resources for the people who needed it. Protect the NHS was a little bit equivocal, wasn't it? It was protect the NHS, and it sort of sounded like staff that they were protecting, but clearly we didn't protect staff properly, because we didn't provide adequate advice about PPE or adequate PPE to do that. And certainly in the community with care workers, we know that didn't happen. So there was a reality about protecting the NHS for people who needed it most, and some of the plans, I think, were really good actually about doing that. And we discovered a lot of people, self-care works. That's the right thing. We overuse health. We've got some idea, you should cure a cold, all of that stuff. But I think the problem was, as I said, that it adversely affected a population of people who needed that care. And because it's actually complicated, and that's the problem with slogans. It's much more complicated than that.
Yeah.
And that getting that complex message out, I feel we failed. And I say we, and I mean us as a country and a society. I don't feel it wasn't a medical thing. I think when people came, we did the right things. But in terms of the slogan, it wasn't mad. It was the right thing, but didn't have the structures around it to enable that to happen right, and that was the problem. So it didn't have the structures for the care homes, and people put back into care homes. We didn't test, and we didn't test and trace and isolate, and without that it was a meaningless plan. That sounds so stark when I say meaningless. It's not meaningless for everyone who is still here, but it was meaningless for what I feel is thousands of people who didn't need to die.
Yeah. Do you want to take a break?
No, it's all right, it's fine.
Yeah.
So we thought that we were going to have to make these decisions about rationing care in hospitals. We thought we were going to be rationing care, and that would leave us with what is described in the literature of the idea of moral injury, that you have had to, through structures above you, around you, that are telling you have to do things, you end up practicing in a way that is actually against your own moral code and belief and what's inside you, your morals. And they talk about healthcare workers having moral injury from this. It came from the army, but that notion of that. And we were sort of ready for that as our moral injury. I don't mean we were fine about it. I mean we were going, this might happen, and we can see this might happen, and how are we going to cope with that, and what are we going to do, and how are we going to think about this in a moral, ethical way when we're making those decisions. But for me personally, and I think particularly for where we work, the moral injury has been something very different. It's been the sense, when the data came out showing that we had the highest death rate in the UK, I was devastated. I was lying on the sofa at home and I read it. It was in The Guardian, and I cried for an hour and I couldn't work out why I was crying. I couldn't work out why this felt so awful. And it dawned on me that this is what I was feeling was moral injury. It was the sense of feeling that I was part of feeling the responsibility, that we had not done enough, that we couldn't stop this somehow. We should have done more. I know, my intellectual mind knows that this was a political decision over which we had no power or influence, and that we did do things that as soon as we found out, when we had discussions with the College of Emergency Medicine, who had discussions with the head of the ambulance service to look at the way in which people were being left at home, and that was actually changed in the process of it while the height of the pandemic was on. That was changed in response to concerns. People were listening. There was some of that moving on, but that really this was about the decisions that our government had made. And I say our government with, I can almost not say that sentence as a thing. It doesn't feel like it's my government even more than ever before. So I think we're carrying this sense. And with that, there are two other bits. One is the PPE fiasco and the notion that we're not protected. As a body of people, we were not protected. The information that came out that actually the virus was downgraded, I can't remember when it was, I think it was in February, so that PPE, what we should wear, did not have to be so strict. That killed our staff members, people I work with, and that's just really hard to live with. I can't see it any other way. And the deaths of people in our hospital who we work with it's like a physical burden, I think, for everyone carries that. And now, so coming through that bit when we're in it, everyone's in the moment and they're working and they're watching difficult things happening and they're trying to do their best. In a way, you're in that moment, and now we're out the other side of the peak. People are really, really sad and really angry. And the anger's coming out in all complicated different ways, because they're angry at the small thing that's in front of them that's annoying them. And actually, I think that we are carrying this moral injury of being part of a system in which we were unable to prevent deaths that are unquestionably preventable. Our job is not to stop people dying. It's if people are dying to look after them when they should do. But I don't believe that's what we did. That for the people we had in our hospital, but not above and beyond, because they weren't there, and that's awful. And there's something very specific for Newham about. We knew these health inequalities were there. We knew that. Our BAME population have always had much worth, kind of suffered from those health inequalities greater than any other, and that this is just like the starkest, most horrific example of that.
I'm just thinking about what role culture and the arts play in this pandemic, from your experience as somebody literally on the front line in the trenches. What do you need from culture and the arts during this?
So I think we need to have other ways of expressing what's happening. So I know that in North London, in the Whittington, they've done quite a lot of things about drawing what you're feeling. Somehow that's easier to do that than saying it. And having people come in and doing that. It's really difficult, that stuff, because people go, it's a bit like mindfulness. I don't want mindfulness. I want a
change of government.
Yeah, I want to change of government, or I want the right PPE. So it's really difficult space. Yeah. But there's something really about shouting it out. So I think the Thank God for Immigrants poster was incredibly powerful that I've seen around in London. It's saying out loud the unsayable, and I think art has a way of doing that that's a way that's palatable, that's amazingly valuable, really, really important. You know, it's been incredibly creative inside hospitals. We've gone, oh wow, let's just do this. And that bit's been really amazing, that bit of creativity. And you kind of go, to continue that creativity with us as clinicians. And some of the creativity's been really moving. So they've, lots of places, and we've done it as handprints, have done a thing, if you weren't able to be with your person who you love who is dying, they've done it as thumbprints or handprints or casts of hands. So a handprint of their hand, which comes in a box with the nurses who, it's so amazing that they did this with you get a handprint and it says, just so you know, your loved one was not alone when they died. I sat with them. And it's got the name of the nurses who've done that. And you go, that is it's so awful that we had to do that, but what an amazing thing. And that level of creativity around, we're in this awful thing, what can we do to bring humanity and human touch and back into this when you can't do all the normal things you did? So I want to harness that bit in there, and I think that is something that our artists and our creatives can do with us, I suppose. Do you know what? I walk around some of the larger teaching hospitals, even the one I work in, and there is beautiful art along the corridors of the Royal London. Beautiful, creative, done with people, it's fantastic. And I walk around near them and there's nothing. And I feel like this is like a artistic representation of those inequalities even within hospitals and the same trust. So I guess there's a message specifically for the small place I work in, and I know there are others across the country in that, which is think of your local hospital
as an art gallery where we can go and collaborate with clinicians to make work.
Yeah, and with patients. Yeah. So think of because you know, the bigger places, lots of people are doing that, but your local small hospital that has the less resources, that's a place.
Thank you, Emma. And thank you to all the people who are working in the NHS, especially any of you who happen to be watching us live. And thank you to all of the health workers across the world who are looking after our health and survival through this pandemic. It was really important to get that perspective from Emma.
Totally. So COVID is what brought us into this online space, and I feel like we're all trying to still make sense of it. But I really wanted to big up what Emma is saying about how artists going to work in these smaller hospitals where, you know, that are forgotten with staff and with patients. So really want to hammer home that point.
Yeah, so for me, there was something definitely there about how, as artists and arts organisers, we need to open our eyes to engaging with who is around us. So yeah, that's really important. So you can read about Emma and all of our contributors on the contributors page of the website. I also think that James found that interview pretty hard to do. Yeah. You're right, babes.
I'm okay. I've run really fast.
You just run.
I'm just really angry. And obviously I know Emma and I know how hard she's worked, and I know everything else that was in the interview. And yeah, I'm really angry because, yeah, you know why.
I do. Should we do some shout outs before we go on to our next thing that we're going to see?
Yes, this is a little WhatsApp exchange between me and Emma. So this is James. If there was one book about radical medicine you'd like to share after your video, what is it?
I'm Emma. Oh God, I feel I should know a good answer, but I don't. We'll ask someone cleverer than me and let you know.
Okay, but what book made you into a radical doctor? It doesn't have to be a medical one, though.
The Color Purple? Race, class, sexuality, power, importance of friendship and caring to empower each other, and generational trauma.
Perfect.
But mostly being brought up in a commune in East London in the 70s made me into a radical doctor. You can thank my mum for that. That was Emma. That was me as Emma, by the way. So Alice Walker's The Color Purple is also on our reading list, and you can click the button reading list on our website for that and other goodies.
Hey, I mean, at my house, you're going to hear babies crying, the dog's going to bark, and the washing machine is still going. So it's live. What can we do? Can I do some shout outs?
Please do.
I want to do a shout out to all the traffic lights, whether they are red or amber or green. This is for you. And I want to do a shout out to the people of Bristol, specifically those warriors that got the goods. You know who you are.
I wanted to do a couple of shout outs to all the humans and non-humans at the Black Lives Matter protests, such as the llama who was at the Portland, Oregon Black Lives Matter protest this weekend. I also wanted to do a shout out to the proxy protest tool. This is something that came through our open call. It's a project by Arjun Harrison Mann and Ben Redgrove, and it's a tool that enables alternative experiences of protest by connecting people together. So you can find that on proxyprotest.com. I also wanted to do a shout out to Black Lives Matter UK organisers because we're broadcasting from the UK. And just a reminder for us to connect to what's happening in your local area and keep on fighting this fight. And before we move on, two more. So the Free Black University Initiative. So they're working to share and create transformative knowledge in the Black community, and they're centering Black people's healing and also centering climate justice and recognizing the relationship between climate crisis and colonialism, which is something that we've previously spoken about. And on that note, also, we wanted to do a shout out to the End Heathrow Immigration Detention protest. So there's going to be an online protest this weekend from the 13th to the 15th of June. You can search for it on Facebook, or otherwise there's going to be a link to it in the YouTube chat. I don't know if, James, you wanted to say something about that one.
I think this is a really important struggle because if the expansion of Heathrow Airport happens, then they will be knocking down some of the existing detention centres and building this huge mega new detention centre for asylum seekers. And I think this is a really good intersection between migration and climate change. And I think that's a really important place and site of organising. So big up to those people on that case.
Definitely. Shall we show our next work?
Yes, please.
Shall I introduce?
Sorry?
Shall I introduce?
No, can I do it?
Please.
You've done loads of chatting, so let me jump in. So next, we would like to present a work by Young Suk Choi, who is currently artist in residence with Asia Art Activism at Raven Row. The work we are showing today is an online recreation of Unapologetic Coughing, which was a live interactive performance, which involved a collective reading, singing, and other actions. Unapologetic Coughing was created for Asia Activism initiative unracializing the coronavirus pandemic in early March this year. Young Suk agreed to recreate Unapologetic Coughing as an online performance for a small audience specifically for this conference, which was super grateful that she did that. So what we're presenting here is like an excerpt of that online performance. So Carl, hit it.
I was on the bus. It was fully packed, but no one sat next to me. I saw a man who turned his head away and covered his face when I passed him. I wrote this performance out of anger, frustration, urgency, and most crucially, a need not to feel alone in this. I hope this performance functions as a rehearsal of a political act. Please keep this script and perform it again and again with the people who have been affected by racist hysteria around COVID-19. This is a collective reading performance with intervention acts. The reading script is a deconstructive composition of the news clips and research articles. We will read it aloud together. We are not taking a turn. We'll read the whole script all together as a one voice of many textures. Please be aware others' paces. Make sure you don't rush or dominate them by reading too fast. And this is an important and fun bit. During the reading, please express your mental and emotional discomfort with your unapologetic coughing. When one person starts coughing, the rest are encouraged to follow with a sense of solidarity. Resume reading only when you sense everyone in this gathering has expressed enough of their discomfort. Reading can be disrupted anytime by this collective gesture of coughing. Make sure your coughing doesn't sound tokenistic. It is a form of expression. Pour your emotion into it and make it genuine. I'm borrowing this bodily method from a medical symptom called psychogenic cough. The term psychogenic cough or habit cough has been used to describe a cough without obvious medical etiology, which is refractory to medical management and considered to have a psychiatric or psychological basis. Typically, this cough is harsh, barking, and non-productive. So let's practice this harsh barking cough together. Imagine yourself in a situation or the memory, particular memory, you'd feel really unpleasant and not comfortable. So have that emotion and pour the emotion into your cough. Can you try? Upset and frustrated, really getting upset and angry. The point, enough is enough in this situation. Very good. A cough is now your newly acquired language. When you use it, make really mean it. And now turn off your video by clicking video button on the bottom. As much as I love to see your faces, this performance is about delivering collective solidarity. Looks quite ready now. Make yourself comfortable. Please remember that you express your emotion in coughing. Let the reading begin. A new global poll by reveals that UK public
changed their behaviour
because
of the threat
of the virus. It shows
It shows 1 in 7 devoid people of origin or appearance. Many parents of children of Chinese heritage have reported bullying, including name calling, such as China virus.
Many parents of children of Chinese heritage have reported bullying, including name calling such as China virus. In London,
there
have been
Been
two
two
separate violent
racist attacks of East Asian men.
cases
Both
Both
cases
cases
started by the
started
organization
violence, shouting at the victims of
victims
coronavirus.
coronavirus.
in
In
Birmingham.
Birmingham, a group of men shouted at a
Chinese woman,
coronavirus.
take your fucking
Virus
coronavirus
and take it back home. Viciously assault her friend.
Viciously assault her friend
brutally assaulted her,
When
crying
unconscious
to defend
on the
her.
pavement.
She was knocked
She
unconscious
was knocked
on
unconscious
the pavement
and treated for
concussion.
In France,
one Vietnamese woman told the newspaper Le Monde
Has been insulted
he
by a
had
car driver who shouted, "Your virus, dirty Chinese, not welcoming France,
Not welcome in France.
head away."
Sped away through a puddle, splashing her.
In Paris,
Chinese restaurant
Totally vandalized with the graffiti
that said
coronavirus,
and
and
its
its front entrance door
was
thrown
by
by
a
a bucket of paint.
of paint.
in
In
Italy,
Italy,
The
First
first
person to
person
seek
to speak
to manipulate the
anxiety was Matteo
Matteo
Salvini.
Italian far-right leader,
Italian
immediately
called
called
the
for the
government
government
to shut
shut
countries'
borders
borders
and defend
and Italy
Italy and
Italian
Italian from
African refugees.
in Australia,
the
the Herald Sun
Own newspaper.
published
the words
virus
China virus
pandemonium
pandemonium
for an image
over an
of a red
image of a red mask.
in Melbourne.
In Melbourne,
Parents
parents
at
of
the
the
Royal
Royal Children's Hospital
have refused
refused to let doctors,
nurses
nurses,
of Asian appearance
Asian appearance,
treat
their
their
children.
children.
The
The Twitter account
Hong Kong bio
whose bio
Includes for freedom,
Freedom.
pictures of Chinese restaurants,
Chinese restaurants serving newborn
mice,
newborn mice
soup,
to dinners
the
with a
diners,
hashtag.
the hashtags,
China
Chinzy,
coronavirus.
coronavirus. These people eat anything that has 4 feet except a frigging table.
It's like
They are the disease
themselves. Mad cow disease.
More than
180,000
cows and 178
humans in the UK alone. Swine flu killed more than
500,000 people worldwide.
Nobody
was vilified
Vilified for eating pork or beef.
Place 3 to 4 fruit bats in a large kettle with ginger, onion, lots of garlic and sea salt, and add water to cover. Bring to a boil and cook for 60 minutes. Strain broth into second kettle. Take the bats, skin them and discard the skin. Remove meat from the bones and return meat and any of the viscera you fancy to the broth. Heat. Serve liberally, sprinkled with the scallions and further seasoned with soy sauce and coconut cream. Makes 4 servings. This recipe was published in New York Times cookbook, written by an English-American food writer and home economist, Jean Hewitt, in 1971. Let's have a look at the review of this book. A delicious surprise, Atlanta Journal. Full of all kinds of recipes, from those loved by health food faddists to just wholesome dishes, Chicago Tribune. Most impressive, Minneapolis Tribune. A treasury of domestic and foreign dishes that should close the culinary gap, Cincinnati Inquirer. Marvelous recipes for using natural foods, house and garden. Let's resume the reading, the last part. It all began
with the Neolithic Revolution.
when we first
cleared
wildlife
habitat
for
for
farming.
farming and livestock.
we received the
Measles,
Tuberculosis
as a consequence.
This epidemic
epidemic started
accelerating
during
the
era of colonial
expansion.
The
pandemic
pandemic created by those colonial
era intrusions
to this day.
us to this day.
the macaques
The macaque lentivirus started from Belgium
from colony in
Congo evolved into HIV.
What
Born
bacteria
bacteria
of the Sudan
started
from
colonial
Colonial
Bangladesh,
now
known as the cholera epidemic.
caused 7
pandemics so far.
How did we respond
to this?
countless
We disposed of a countless number
of animals to protect us.
keep
expanding.
Cutting down the forests
for palm oil plantations,
farming,
cattle
farming,
mining
business,
NASA's
satellite captured
astonishing
the astonishing images show a dramatic pollution over China. Scientists observed that the emissions from motor vehicles, power plants, and industrial facilities started reducing from Wuhan
City
City and spread
across the country.
China's
air
has
never
been so
for
clear
recent
years.
Coronavirus is a messenger.
It
Is nature's outcry.
the end action. At this point, if you want, you can turn on the video and join the last action. We're gonna make apocalyptic noise to the song Ringo Ringo Roses. This song has been often associated with the Great Plague. A rosy rash was a symptom of the plague, and posies of herbs were carried as a protection and to ward off the smell of the disease. Sneezing and coughing was a final fatal symptom, and all fall down was exactly what happened. Your last action is to makeshift the end of the world noise as loud as possible along to this song. What does the apocalypse mean to you? It can be a total destruction of everything that we have built. It can also be willfully hopeful, as every beginning requires the absolute ending. Reveal your naive and wild reactions to the end of the human system. You ready to make a lot of noise?
That is all I'm taking with these goodbye.
Spreading.
Just to say that we obviously should have put a warning at the beginning of this film to say this work contains racism directed at Chinese and East Asian people. So apologies for getting that wrong. Are you okay, Cecilia?
Yeah. It's really difficult to like hear that piece, and even when I was yeah. As an East Asian person, I found it really hard, like just even when we were performing it, and it took me a few days before I could actually face reading the text. It's just pretty intense. Yeah.
I'm really grateful for Young Suk for making this work and also for remaking it for the conference, for sharing those experiences of racism which have really been amplified during COVID, and for working so quickly in response. And I know, like, that's super hard, and particularly when the subject matter is very distressing, and I really value that.
Me too. Youngsuk wanted to share the message: don't patronize bat eaters. So we should all be aware of the cultural hierarchies that these sorts of judgments can perpetuate. And yeah, for us all to really take care of that when we're kind of, so hence this aim of unracializing the coronavirus epidemic. So we just wanted to point to a couple of things on our reading list. So one of them is the Surviving the Apocalypse Together workbook, which is a mutual aid, safety and wellness planning template. And that's from Mad Queer Organizing Strategies. And that is a pretty great resource on how we can address wellness and safety and healing in our own communities. And it touches on the ideas of like how you can organize your own pod.
Also, shout out to Asia Art Activism, and they've produced a really great resource for Asian diaspora in solidarity with Black communities. So you can find that on their website by Googling it. We were going to share a video from Selena, Thompson, and Bella. Those of you that have watched previous episodes will know what I'm talking about. But Selena's taking some time for herself this week for self-care and resting. But we just wanted to take a moment to send a lot of love to Selena and Bella.
Definitely. Yeah. I'm looking forward to seeing whether Bella's been doing any more acrobatics.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, so our next work today comes from Swasi Mears-Clark, and Swasi is an artist working in dance, and we discovered him through our partner Sophie and Saleh. So Swasi has been working a lot around touch and how to include visually impaired folk in their work, which obviously during lockdown has been pretty difficult. But he's been doing some really beautiful work around what he calls strategies of solidarity, what I've figured out so far regarding audience members. So just for clarity, Swasi is based in Germany. So there's a couple of references in the work that we're about to present that refer to the German social security system.
Shall we dive straight into this and have a listen to what Swasi's been doing?
Yes, please. Hit it, Carl.
Reflections. There's this dance form that I have been developing since 2014. It's called non-visual dance. My interest with it is to make dance pieces that are implicitly accessible to blind, visually impaired, and sighted persons. So for years, I focused on developing this dance form further such that it would wholly fulfill that criteria. Although I had made non-visual dance pieces before worn and felt, I did not think nor know of the barriers that prevent a visually impaired or blind person from even being able to afford a ticket, and after that, find their way to the theater. It was Caroline from Diversity Arts Culture laying down some sweet knowledge about Germany's, quote, sheltered workshop, in German Werkstatt, system that made it blatantly clear that the monetary cost of going to the theater is high for a majority of persons with disabilities. I often experience my ignorance as a sort of huge, barren metal pot, a sturdy yet cold form. And after that conversation with Caroline, I was excited to fill the pot of my ignorance with some sort of warm, slow-cooked knowledge and activism. So, as I understand it now, it is common that the cost of personal assistance for blind and visually impaired persons are paid by the state when the person's activities are work-related and nothing else. Also, thank you, Catherine, for sharing this piece of information with me. I recognize this fact as one manifestation of a discriminatory, oppressive system that does not value the whole person and their life, but rather just values the labor they can provide Hashtag ableist capitalism, why you so dumb? In this case, specifically, the lack of support creates economic barriers against accessing the many cultural possibilities that Berlin has to offer. The cost of going to the theater more than doubles when you include paying out of pocket for a personal assistant, a prohibitive barrier to many. Last year, in 2019, I took a workshop with Imke Baumann titled Barrieren überwinden in der Freiheitsszene. Basically kind of overcoming barriers in the independent art scene. And this workshop was hosted by PAP, Performing Arts Program Berlin. Among other things, we discussed how the way from the tram stop to the ticket counter to the foyer of Ballhaus Ost Theater is inaccessible to those that are visually impaired. After putting on glasses that simulate having a visual impairment, I felt like it would take at least 5 hours and a lake full of luck for me to find even the front door, much less the ticket counter. Sophienseele has more than 5 entrances, and only one of them leads to the foyer, which is confusing for any theater attendee. Between the cost barrier and barriers in navigation and spatial design, I saw an opportunity here for change, the possibility to concretely respond to the oppressive system that keeps me from fulfilling my wish of sharing dance with all just people, by creating this pickup service that I will now surely be implementing in my future performance works. So, the pickup service. For the first blog post in this series, I want to share with you the pickup service for audience members that I developed together with Elena Polza from Ehrliche Arbeit, the press team from Sophienseele, and Imke Baumann from Förderbahn e.V. and Berlin für Blinde Projekt. Please note that this pickup service could not be created as a considerate and caring structure without the consultation of an expert who knows the lived experience of being blind or having a visual impairment. Hashtag nothing without us is for us. The pickup service was offered as an access service for blind and visually impaired audience members during each performance evening of Warnenfeld in May 2019 at Sophienseele in Berlin. This service offers free personal assistance to those who require it and would like to attend the performance, so that the personal expense for hiring a personal assistant doesn't remain a barrier to their desire to attend. The team. We had a mix of volunteers and a couple of people from my artistic team as the picker-upper, or guides. The Projekt Berlin für Blinde has a network of volunteers that they work with for their various projects, so it was super lovely of them to reach out to their network so that the service could be offered for every performance. Without them, it would have been only possible for 2 evenings instead of 4. It was also important and beneficial that these volunteers already had experience being guides. For my artistic team, we also had the assistant production manager, Falk Greve, and the dramaturg, Louise Truehart, as guides. The infrastructure. We used the theater's existing way of handling registrations for accessibility services. In the past, Sophienseele requested that theater attendees who are wheelchair users call them before the day of the performance they want to go to, because for security reasons, there are only 2 wheelchair users allowed into the theater at any one time. So it was a way to try and avoid having to turn away theater attendees who are wheelchair users at the door. So to make things less complicated for our pickup service, we use the same calling system and even the same phone number for our registration. We published an announcement about the service on the webpage of the performance. The announcement was posted directly underneath the description of Warnenfeld on Sophienseele's website. This was our main avenue to advertise the service. The announcement read, Pickup service and accessibility. If required, we offer, in cooperation with Berlin für Blinde Förband e.V., a pickup service for blind and visually impaired people from the nearby S-Bahn and subway stations Hackische Markt and Weinmeisterstraße. To use the pickup service, please contact us 48 hours before the performance at the latest. The performance takes place in complete darkness and is aimed at people with and without visual impairment. Attendance requires the ability to stand for at least 30 minutes without any aids, such as walkers, wheelchairs, canes, and crutches. For further information and registration, please contact us at 030-2789-0034. The closest main public transportation stations were set as pickup locations, our points A. For Sophiensele, these points A were Weinmeisterstraße and Hackische Markt stations. Both stations are within a few minutes walking distance from the theater. The service also included pickup as well as drop-off to the stations. Our point B was the foyer of the theater, where all audience members would be gathered. As a part of the choreography, the performance Worn and Felt began with the performance leading every member of the audience by hand from the foyer into the theater space, hence our choice of the foyer as our point B. The service. We wanted the service to be personal. So upon registration at the provided number of Sophiensele, the audience member was given the cell phone number of their guide. The guide would also receive the phone number of the audience member they were escorting. Each guide would then personally call each individual signed up for the service on the same day as their registration, or the next day, to discuss and agree upon a time to meet on the platform, figure out the meeting point, and clarify how to find each other. It is a short exchange, but an important one. It enabled us to personalize the experience from the very beginning. It also allows the audience member and the guide to have each other's phone numbers just in case of any surprises. We made sure that the guide would be available throughout the whole performance so that if the audience member, for whatever reason, wanted to leave the performance early, they could immediately be escorted back to their chosen station. But how can this service be improved in the future? From the side of our team, all the parts of the route from station to foyer to theater space and back were covered, except for the way from the theater space back into the foyer during the end of the performance. So that was an oversight to correct in the future. Also, budgeting for the guides from the get-go when applying for grants would be good too, which we didn't do that time. From the side of the theaters and or arts institutions, a pickup service should be a standard service offered by every theater such that they take on their lawful responsibility as state-funded organizations to not discriminate against persons with disabilities. It's a no-brainer that creating further opportunities for people to engage with dance/art is within not only their mission statements, but also a boon to their corporate images. If you have any thoughts, questions, or comments on what I've shared, get in touch. I'm super always happy for more exchange.
I so love this. Ableist capitalism, why are you so dumb? Nothing without us. Nothing about us without us is for us. Hashtag.
Do you want to get that right? Nothing.
No, I don't need to. People know what it is.
You always take the hashtags, though, don't you?
I take the hashtags and then I mess them up because I'm too busy putting like nuts and raisins in my mouth because I've had to run today.
I love this too, because it is, as Wasi says, a no-brainer. And I love the simplicity and the way that, Swasi kind of like applies this knowledge of movement and choreography from everyday life and it incorporates it back into the structures of experiencing art. And it's generous. And shout out to Swasi's cat, which you heard during the piece.
We managed to get one cat in there. Also, Zwasi asked us to share some texts that have inspired and guided him in his healing and also made him laugh. So Cultural Politics of Emotion by Sarah Ahmed and Going Home by Yar Gyasi. Yar Gyasi, I've just said that right. Zwassi also, Zwassi's never shown his work in the UK. So all you programmers, all you curators, go on the internet and book Zwassi's work. And I'm waiting for a message from Zwassi to come back to say that they've received those bookings and a full tour has been booked. And once we've had that confirmation, we'll continue with the show.
So, drink anyone?
Actually, I have something to show you. I hope this works.
Yeah.
This is Emma Young. She just sent me this message from A&E where she's working today, just to say thank you for all the kind messages that she got in the YouTube chat. She really appreciates that. It's made her day and made a hard day in A&E better for her.
Big love to Emma.
Yeah, and the tour was being booked. I've had the confirmation email in. That was so fast. It's so simple, isn't it?
Big love to Zwassi and the work that he's doing.
Yeah,
so we wanted to mention about something that's on our reading list, which is related to the issues around care and how we work with each other and look after one another. So please check out the lecture on Access Intimacy, which is by Mia Mingus, and I think there's a link to both the transcript as well as a video there, so you can choose whatever works for you.
Also, I think we have a presentation next week from Jess Tom of Tourette's Hero, which I think will super relate to this presentation. So all these nice themes weaving through the program, almost like we planned it like that.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I like pulling out the reading list parts because I find it's really useful to draw on these tools for organizing and healing, especially in these difficult times, and learning from other movements and communities and people who've kind of been trying to do this and writing it down and sharing that. So yeah, I really appreciate that.
So next up, we have another NHS worker, but also an artist. So Fox Irving is a bit of an enigma, really. She works as a mental health nurse, leading on improving services, but is also an artist and activist. And last autumn, I was able to work with Fox, and I was just really blown away by her ability to hold space for some very, very distressed people in some super challenging situations, and to do this in a really creative way, but also really respected people's knowledge and experiences and their own learning. And so this is an interview with Lois Keedon, who's the head of the Live Art Development Agency, a person that needs no introduction. So Fox is going to explore her work around Working Class Working Group, which was paused due to the COVID pandemic, and the impact of her labour, working for the NHS, which is kind of ongoing. So Fox is actually working today in the health service. So Carl, can we see this, please?
Marginalised sort of peoples, particularly in this context, we say sort of artists, they've always sort of been developing kind of creative strategies outside or beyond institutional, mainstream or traditional sort of contexts, really to kind of bypass those contexts as well as being excluded from those contexts, to try and produce radical and instrumental art and ideas. Can you talk about this and tell everybody about your own practice, and particularly about the work that you've been doing with the Working Class Working Group?
Yeah. So I've been thinking about this question, and I think as my practice has grown over the years, it's always been to kind of use art as a tool to kind of create change and kind of rethinking of those unlearned codes that we have. And a part of the Working Class group was that I've actually got massive imposter syndrome right now here in this room, and it was the bringing together of the group to feel from communities we felt that when we're in the arts that we don't belong, and to stop saying I'm sorry, I'm here, I am here, I exist, and I need to be considered. And with the group, for me, it was started off to kind of think of how do we create when we have to, pay the rent or work full time, when, certain big arts organisations are only really offering us crumbs to do the work. And for me, I think this is done, or how I do it is by creating space, making a space, and finding your people, and sharing the skills to kind of find what connects you. And when you're in that space, it's an alternative space, and then when you're together, you start to deconstruct the space and the things around you. Now, I'm going to give an example, because the working class working group, I'll be honest, I had many unsuccessful arts applications to run this group, but I was quite adamant that I wouldn't run this group of working class artists to kind of try and pull apart the systems that are keeping them in our place without offering some sort of payment or fee. And I don't know if I was right in doing that or I was stubborn, but it was kind of really important to me that I made this space and I could pay people for their time. And we kind of pondered, do you seek to overcome the struggle, or is it to recognise the struggle and to liberate? But again, are both of those only obtained by having a fight? And we'll talk a bit more about this, but it's kind of very much based in my practice of being an activist and kind of using a non-hierarchical kind of decentralized method.
Just in terms of sort of structurally, can you just maybe just say a little bit about how it worked? Because you did it as an open call, didn't you, for sort of people to sort of say they wanted to be part of the group. So it's a sort of self-selecting group in a way. But how many people were part of the group, and how many sessions did you do? Where was it left? Where do you think it's going to go?
So the story behind it was that I only got funding for 8 places. So and that was for people to attend 6 sessions over bi-monthly sessions over 3 months. And when I put that open call out, I was overwhelmed by the amount of applications I had for people wanting to be in that space, to wanting to be part of that group, to wanting to talk about the struggles that kind of I called it working class group because that was the buzzword at the time, and I really struggled with that because I'm actually benefit class. My mum was on benefits. She has a little part-time job in the school, like I said, but kind of we saw ourselves as working class, and it wasn't till I was put in this art world that I realised that actually where I was. So we had this overwhelming response to the open call, and it was really hard to select. And when we brought the group together of 8 of us into the space, it was decided there and then that we would make an a resource for all those, for the people that, so anything we discussed, anything we recorded the conversations, because we wanted to have the people to hear those discussions we are having, but also it was important to hear it coming from working class voices, benefit class voices, without jargon.
I mean, were there just in terms of forming the thinking about the group and forming the group, were there other sort of models of sort of creative resistance or sort of coalitions and collaborations? You've talked about, one of your beautiful quotes is, collaboration is fundamental to survive in a world falling apart. Were there other things that you sort of looked at that were sort of looking to affect sort of systemic change that sort of inspired the group, or were you really sort of like attending to this because you felt nothing had been done?
Well, I think we've talked about it, and it was actually a DIY. The Free University was in Liverpool, was that kind of radical thinking, of radical thinking of like what education would look like, and I was inspired by that. That was one of kind of one things I looked to. when forming the group and thinking about what the group would look like, because it was interesting for me with that group. Towards the end, they really struggled with the collaboration, with like trying to hold that group together and the dynamics. So what I got from that was trying to think about, and I think this is where my mental health nursing comes into play. Holding space is important to me. Holding space is important. And when you get a group together, you start slowly with, you need to build trust in order to be vulnerable, in order to share your work, because art is kind of, when you're doing live art especially, you are sharing a really vulnerable part of you sometimes. And how do you know if you're sharing too much or when you need to withhold? So the beginning of the groups was really just bringing that kind of trust by sharing little parts of ourselves and kind of hearing others' voices. Those things have influenced me, is bringing together to rethink kind of radical ways of being together, but also able to hold that space and hear each other. Because then that's where you build the seeds to kind of start to be radical and think of how things can be different.
Fox, you've just sort of touched on it, so let's sort of talk about it, because it was always important to you to keep your art and your activist practice separate from your NHS work, as sort of separate things, sort of separate bits of you. But increasingly, and particularly because of the impact of the crisis and because of the work that you're doing with the group around care, those aspects of your work are really sort of coming together, aren't they? And sort of are informing and influencing. I wonder if you could sort of just tell us a bit about that and what you'd like others to hear from that and take away from that. And
the more I look and the more I go into this crisis and this current crisis, it's really impacted about how they can come together and how they are coming together. I can't ignore it anymore, because a lot of going forward, it needs to be about care. I think art needs to be about care and kind of a need to develop a practice to kind of care for each other. I think it's really important going forward. And a lot I got from the working class group is, well, one thing I got is often, to be an artist, you have to raise, it's seen you have to raise out of your class or where you come from. But instead you should be rising with your group and not from it. And we're still trying to pull that apart, but a lot of that is, how do you generate a sense of self-worth? Are we worth it? As many marginalised communities, groups, we feel we're made to feel we're not worth it. And trying to understand where that self-worth comes from, and how in that as well, how do you keep yourself safe when we're contributing to that space? And I think that is a practice of care. It's a practice of self-care, knowing when to withdraw and when to bring yourself back in, and being aware of that. Because I know, especially with the current climate, this feels a very much need to kind of, I should be doing something about this, I should be doing something about this, but sometimes you have to withdraw a bit in order to stay together. And I think going forward, it's going to be about kind of artist as, or the live artist as, people who care for each other, who look after and build that practice. My final thought on that is kind of, when we talk about what's going to be the new normal and what that looks like, is the normal is always a system that is trying to keep us in our place. And when you're sat there and you question, do you withdraw? You withdraw if you need to, and in order to kind of then come out to use the art and use what you've got to creatively address the failures in society. And you do that in a way, and for me, as I've always said, is collaboration is fundamental, you work with communities and you reflect, you take those conversations and you don't lay claim to them, but you put them out there as a collaborative message.
That's fabulous, Fox. Thank you. I think probably you and I want to sign off with a few words to the people of our hometown.
Yes.
And to our boys in red, and to everybody engaging with the For About conference, to say, you'll never walk alone.
For sure. We will never will. And we love you.
We love you. Thanks so much, Fox.
We love you, Fox. We love you, Lois.
You'll never walk alone. Yeah. Fox is really wicked, and I love the links between Zwosi and Fox's work. This kind of intersectioning and moving between spaces in really fluid ways. Also, just say Zwosi's in the chat, by the way, so send him some love.
So yeah, big up Zwosi and all of the contributors watching online and in the chat. Totally.
Can we chat about care for a moment, Cecilia?
Yeah, sure. What were you wanting to say?
I wanted to reflect on the conversation that we had on Monday night, having when we were putting together the program and reflecting on it, and about care and the complexity of care, because care can be paternalistic and care can be icky and care can be hierarchical and problematic. And just thinking about a workshop I was in 4 or 5 years ago with an incredible mental health activist called Julie Goshling from Nottingham, who had been in one of the old Victorian asylums for a very long time, like 20, 30 years, had been locked away. And she spoke really passionately about wanting to move into the word support rather than care, that in mental health thinking anyway, that she wanted to be supported in her madness rather than cared for and have that taken away. And I don't think that necessarily undermines what Fox is saying at all, but it's just thinking about how we work mutually and collaboratively, and how care, we talk about caregiver and care receiver, but actually it's much more fluid than that. And there's always these transitions and hierarchies that are always fluid and changing. And that's super, super hard, difficult work. It's really, as you know, it's super hard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I guess when we were talking about it and just thinking through and listening to Fox speak about her experiences, then I always come back to, this idea of challenging the medicalized model of care. And maybe, some people talk about the idea of reducing harm. So people safe, reducing harm. And that sort of approach and that sort of language is essential to some people's approach to, I suppose, healing and trauma-informed approaches and things like that. So people like the Chicago Freedom School are really all about that kind of harm reduction, and that being the first sort of way for people to come into a space so that they can be safe, and be together. So but I do want to go back to some of the issues of class that Fox was talking about, and I wanted to do a shout out to The Right Lube. And they are on the reading list with a piece called Antisocial Social Practice, and that's Hava and Maz, and they are 2 working class trans people who've been setting the art world alight with their critiques of class and race and anti-Semitism and politics and activism, as well as prison abolition. They've been really speaking a lot about these issues. And I know that they're also really kind of working on campaigns, for example, with CAPE, that's Community Action on Prison Expansion. And you can find them on social media. I think there's probably going to be a little link in the YouTube chat about that as well. So yeah, big up all of the trans folk out there, especially Black, Indigenous and people of color who are trans. And I also wanted to give a special shout out to there's a campaign at the moment to support Ollie, Justice for Ollie, and that's Oliver Charles Christian, who is a queer disabled Black dancer and performer who was assaulted by the police in his home recently. So you'll be able to see the GoFundMe campaign, Justice for Ollie, that's going to be in the YouTube chat. So yeah, send your love and support to him, and yeah.
Thank you for all those shout outs. Shall we talk about the next work we're going to experience? Because I know you were really excited about it.
I was, yeah. It's a really inspiring example of how to challenge and put in place and really implement this idea of a reimagined way of curating. In other words, how do we curate through building allyships with grassroots organizations and people who we consider, like i.e. the people within the art world consider to be non-professionals. So this is a chat between Kat from Stroll in Portland, who collaborated with Roya from Pica on an exhibition called No Human Involved. And this was the 5th annual exhibition of artwork on sex work made by sex workers. And No Human Involved, the exhibition took place at Pica in autumn 2019. Shall we hear from Roya and Kat?
I'd love to, yes.
Hi, my name is Kat Stellis, and I am one of the members of the curating team for the exhibition No Human Involved with Pica and Stroll.
Hi, I'm Roya Amir Soleimani, and I'm also one of the curators of No Human Involved, the 5th annual Sex Workers Art Show that took place at Pica, Portland Institute for Contemporary Art, in the fall of 2019. We want to begin by acknowledging that here in what is now called Portland, Oregon, on Turtle Island, we are settlers on the traditional lands of the Multnomah, Wasco, Cathlamet, Clackamas, bands of Chinook, Tualatin Kalapuya, Malala, and many other Indigenous peoples. We extend a special welcome to all Indigenous people taking part in this virtual event, and invite everyone watching to honor the Indigenous people whose lands you are on today.
We also wanted to offer a broader acknowledgement that you cannot have conversations about sex work without acknowledging larger interlocking systems of injustice. We know that Black trans women have the highest risk of fatality of any sex workers, and that the common narratives around state-sanctioned executions of Black folks often erase Black trans women, which is something we see again and again in the history of sex work. We wanted to let everyone know that we intend to donate the majority of the fee for this presentation to organizations and groups serving Black trans women and Black femmes.
And we want to acknowledge that as two women of color who are not Black, we are always thinking about what it means to be addressing anti-Blackness within our institutions and spheres of influence and work, including in curatorial practice. And now we're going to shift over to talking a bit more about the Sex Workers Art Show overall and its different components, and Kat's going to tell us more about that.
Thank you so much. A quick overview of sort of the structure of how the exhibition was built. It was the 5th annual Sex Workers Art Show, as Roya mentioned before. We had an exhibition, symposium, publication through Rabbits Road Press, and if you're interested in seeing some images from that, hearing more about the curatorial statements, which we will get into a little bit as well as we talk today, you can go to pica.org and search No Human Involved to see arts, bios, images, and programming.
So this project was exemplary of a lot of the ways in which Pica as an institution and Stroll coming together taught us to rethink what it means to curate and how we curate, and all of the different ways in which a project could be realized through a grassroots and institutional collaboration. And the process was really essential to the learnings and takeaways from this project, and in helping Pica as an organization think about how we do things differently institutionally, and Stroll also has thought a lot about, what it means to partner with an organization and collectively how we can be redistributing wealth and exercising equity better together. So some of the ways that that showed up in the curation of No Human Involved. One of them goes back to what I just mentioned a moment ago around redistribution of wealth, that an institution like an Institute for Contemporary Art has space, it has staff, it has a budget, it has clout, influence, political power, and any institution that denies that is really like hiding from the resources and the wealth that it does hold, and acknowledging that. And so going forward, both in this moment around all of the ways in which we're all thinking about justice anew and the futures that we want to realize, we have to be thinking about how wealth is being redistributed and who it's benefiting. And with No Human Involved, PICA, it really challenged in a good way PICA to think about what it meant to listen, build trust with another organization doing work on the ground, center the voices and perspectives and artistic practices of current and former sex workers with a focus on Black trans women, Indigenous, and other people of color, truly co-curating and not taking ownership of curation as the institution that was involved, what it meant to really take a step back and really put money, staff time, marketing assets, resources, visibility, the wealth of donors, all of these things, and ensuring that it was going to the community that it claimed to be supporting in a way that a lot of institutions often just employ in a way that serves that is self-serving. So this was really guiding a lot of our decision making and some of the ways that we chose to try to exercise equity. And this may be a moment where, Kat, I would ask you like how that looked and felt for you too on your end. But there are some specific ways like around budgets that we thought about and the open call process for curating of artists, and some of the ways that you were thinking about exhibitions that we could talk a little bit more about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And it really was just a huge pleasure coming from a small grassroots organization like Stroll, being able to partner with Portland Institute of Contemporary Art. One of the ways that we looked at the curatorial practice was as an exhibition, we wanted to create a living space. And I don't mean living space as far as something that is going to continue to necessarily hold a physical space, but something that folks can go back and look through the lens of whatever is happening right now and redress, learn from, and contextualize the narratives of the folks that we got to help take that space up and give that platform to. And so I think that was something that was really, really centered. As well as acknowledging that when you are bringing together a group of marginalized folks, we wanted to make sure that we were paying attention also to the audience, because it needed to be a safe space for artists as well, not just for the folks that were interested in coming. And that's part of truly centering the experience and narratives of the folks that we had the pleasure of involving in No Human Involved. And for sex work specifically, that meant making sure that the audience was centered around learning and around general appreciation for those arts, and not white saviorism or voyeurism, which is something that I can tell from personal experience is very common with something like a sex workers art show. And so I say, that those were two of our really hard focuses.
Yeah, I would also add, as I'm reflecting back on it, that PICA had a lot of conversations about like, how do we ensure safety in a way that was really led by the community and not our assumptions of what felt safe. We talked a lot about, going back to kind of what you said, Kat, around voyeurism, like how will we navigate, say, a panel discussion that was all or like 90% sex workers of color or other marginalized folks who are artists and sex workers. How do we ensure that the Q&A, for example, during that discussion felt safe, or like we were really mindful of what might feel unsafe or inappropriate or voyeuristic, and how would we intervene or address that in the moment? Really thinking about those things in advance and anticipating them, because this was a project that did bring together a community of sex worker artists, but also a lot of folks who just come to PICA programming and have no connection, and perhaps really skewed or backwards ideas of sex work as labor, sex work in relationship to feminism that still has so much unlearning to be done, sex work, politics, all of these things that are kind of that a lot of our audiences are really at a one-on-one level with, no matter how much they pride themselves on feeling or identifying as progressive, which is a big thing in Portland specifically, is an issue.
Yes. Yes.
And Kat actually facilitated one of the panel discussions that a lot of the stuff I just mentioned came up, and that we were trying to be really thoughtful about. We also had an interesting open call process that was really oriented around like keeping barriers to in the application process low. And then we had our own version of kind of equitable pay scale. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that, Kat.
Yeah, it was really just awesome being someone who is coming from outside to arrive at an institution that was able to have an open conversation with us about how they're paying artists. I think once money starts getting talked about, a lot of folks all of a sudden don't really want to have those conversations. And what we did is we used the wage model, which a lot of folks may be familiar, and kind of use that as like as a stepping off point to talk about how much artists were getting paid. But we also wanted to make sure that we adjusted it for the concept of equity. We wanted to make sure that a Black trans woman was the highest paid artist in our show, because she deserved it, and because we were accounting for the fact that the labor of marginalized folks is worth more, because historically it's been undervalued. And that was something that I think a lot of institutions should sit down and decide, how are we actually financially reflecting and having open conversations that might be uncomfortable around the value of labor. And yeah, that's something. I know that we also don't have a ton of time, so we can totally move on to some questions that we wanted to kind of ask each other as far as what it really meant to be doing a show where it was Roya from PICA and a couple of hookers. So I think that's like, just the truth of what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Which makes me think of something that Kat had said in our opening remarks at the opening reception for the exhibition, which actually drew over 500 people and was our highest attendance for an exhibition in PICA's 25-year history. Kat, you'd mentioned like turning over the keys to a couple of hookers on that night when we made those opening statements. And the reason I honestly remember that is because we literally did hand the keys over to you and Matilda from Stroll, our co-curator. And that was another way in which PICA was thinking about turning over space, power, and resources and redistribution, right? So that gets to a question that we both kind of have for each other, and we could each speak from our respective positions. But how did it feel to build trust between us? Because it didn't just start out with, we didn't even know each other at first. Like what did that look like or feel like for you from your position?
Absolutely. And it is, a context for folks, both myself and the other co-curator besides Roya, have been in the sex industry. Speaking to my own experience, I've been in the adult industry, sex industry for probably around 6 years. And I'm privileged to be able to be really open about that. that being said, coming into an academic institution, it was nerve-wracking because it's not something that I have an experience doing. It's not something that we had experience doing as an organization. Our art shows previously had been more DIY style. And I think that PICA really did build trust with us by coming to us as true and honest co-curators. They made sure that we were part of the decisions that were being made just like any other co-curators were, and had physical, tangible ways that they showed they trusted us, like handing over the space so that we could do events afterwards, giving us the keys so that we could get in when there was just like the regular front desk people there, inviting us up into the office spaces, and making sure that they were, I mean, I'm sure that there was work that had to be done for each person that was interacting with us who had maybe even never met a sex worker, to be able to do that in a way that felt really authentic. And yeah, I think that it's something that I haven't encountered very often, but working with PICA was an experience where when we had the opening night and we were talking to people, it truly did feel like something that everyone did together, not just the curators, but also the artists that we were able to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for PICA, for myself, as someone who is really committed to ensuring that there is a connection to like community work, activism, and social justice in both how a project is realized through artistic institutions, and not just in the content, right? That and perhaps even more so the how, and like what gets us to the place of like opening the doors for an exhibition or a performance or a festival, that process is the most critical part of the whole thing. And that's what actually allows people to change and do better and like make mistakes and learn from them, and understand their role in like the labor, the collective labor that it's going to take to realize the justice that we all want to see. And so in terms of how that showed up with trust building, like for me as a community, as a curator who tries to be community minded, what I recall is that I was almost in my intent on like allowing Matilda and Kat and Stroll and the sex worker community to be centered. There were almost moments where I was so hyper focused on ensuring that you felt like you were leading and it was your voice that was centered and prioritized, that I almost took too much of a step back. And that was an exercise in, and then you all called me in more, and as like, you know, actually you have valuable experience and insight and perspective that we want. Like this is a true collaboration. And I realized that we had gotten to a place of trust in that process because of it. But also that we need to understand that those of us who come from institutions, in working to center other folks, that also sometimes it can actually be more work for them if you don't step up and just do the thing you're trained to do. And you know, that really was like a learning moment for me. I was like, wait, like I can just do this thing, and they don't have to weigh in on every single little detail, because that takes a lot of time and energy. And so we got to a place where it flowed in a way that I think felt like more natural and organic. And also, you know, we had to have like some social moments where we broke down the professional masquerade a little bit too. And there's a lot of pressure to perform professionalism that we all feel pressure around. And I think that like, you know, we all face, we all have to perform that labor in different ways. And it's all wrapped up in like different levels of privilege and stuff too. But I really appreciated that we got to a place of like what I consider to be actual, like a kind of friendship that,
yeah. And
Yeah, a kind of friendship that allowed for a way of working together that was genuine and that didn't just feel like a strictly professional collaboration that started and ended with like the timeline of the project.
Yeah, and from the other side of that, I think that my advice to anyone who is an institution that's excited about collaborating with a group that maybe doesn't have the experience is just everyone to just come ready to learn. I think that there was so many learning experiences, so many like personal check-ins and self-assessments that had to happen throughout, not only so that we could support each other best, but so that we could support the artists who we were working with best. Because at the end of the day, our shared vision as curators was to create a platform that was safe for artists with a diverse and unique group of narratives around their personal experience in the sex industry could take up space in a meaningful way. And when you have those discussions and you find folks that are united with you in a vision, you will be immaculately surprised of how easy it is to get along. And that's something that I think is just really special and something that I would love to see more of, because when you build those types of relationships as an institution, you're telling other institutions, hey, look at this works. We can do this. And breaking down in a super active and tangible way the barriers that exist in academia and contemporary art, especially to hold space with folks that don't have that background and to make something that is better and more informed because of it. And that's something I think we really were able to do. I hope that everybody who's watching this does take the time to check out the PICA website at No Human Involved to see photos of the art and bios of the artists who we had. They're so amazing. We don't have enough time to talk about all of them, and they honestly are great at telling their own stories. So we have that information on the website. Yes. I'm not sure if there's anything else you want to add, Roya.
I think I would just add that if you have any questions directly for us, which pertain to the exhibition or the work that each of us do in our respective communities, or around this intersection or these like kind of critical inquiries and questions of sex work and art and kind of like the labor involved, right? Then you can email the organizers for about, and they will direct those questions to us, and we're happy to then route some answers their way and get you some more information. And please look to this as an example of not the only way to do something, but the like futures and possibilities that we want to realize in reforming or like completely reimagining the art world.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all so much.
All right. Thank you.
I'm Roya from PICA. You can find out more about the exhibition No Human Involved, including images of the artworks, and you can just go on Stroll PDX website. I think you'll be able to find a link to that in the YouTube chat, as well as on our website on the contributors page.
So, Cecilia, like at this point in time when like every arts organization across the country is trying to be like super radical and super woke, what can these institutions learn from what Roya and Kat are saying?
Well, James, good question. What do you think, James?
I think that I want to go and work at PICA. So I'm thinking about what they're talking about who controls the means of production. So like as an artist, I really want to be supported, but I also don't want barriers to be put in the way. So how can arts organizations liberate artists or communities or the people that they're working with to be creative, to be heard, and to hold that difficult work? And the thing I wrote down, what that Roya said, was how do we get to opening the doors? So how do we really focus on on good process, and that's everything for me, because if you've got good process, then the product should be okay. What about you, my fellow professional curator?
Unprofessional curator. Yeah, I really value Kat and Roya's honest reflections about how to enact a new type of curating, a type of curating that centers community, centers equity. And I'm really heartened by how they break down what professionalism is and how you sometimes need to step outside of that space, outside of that professional space, and what it means to do that. And I think that, like in professional art circles, then there's a lot of chat about what cultural democracy is, what co-creation is, and what cultural equity is. But actually really having the time to kind of think through, reflect, and unpick what the human side of those things is, I think is super important. And it has to be remembered in everything that we do. So, yeah.
Yeah, so much work to do. I wanted to do a shout out to the Minnesota City Council, who have begun the process of defunding the police.
Shout out to them. That's a bit of a tangential shout out. But anyway, I wanted to mention something from the reading list, which is the article by Roya and Erin from PICA, together with some advice from the Advisory Council of the Global First Nations Performance Network. And it's called Instigating Institutional Change Towards Decolonization. And you can find that in our reading lists. And it's all about how PICA has taken steps towards decolonizing and indigenizing the practices and curatorial processes within their organization. So, shall we talk about the next thing that we're going to see?
Yeah, so our next contribution is from the awesome world galaxy famous campaigners No White Saviors, who are based in Kampala in Uganda, but their work has been changing debates and consciousness about anti-blackness all around the world. They are a team of majority black, majority female activists with amazing white allies, and they have been debunking but also legally challenging the phenomenon of white saviorism from an African perspective. So white people using black people's images on social media to clout their own social media profiles. People such as Stacey Dooley. Yeah, they did not like Stacey Dooley, did they? And they've been mounting campaigns against sex trafficking, illegal healthcare, and inter-country adoptions, and they're just wicked.
Yeah, they are brilliant. So today we're going to hear from Olivia, Kelsey, and Wendy, who make up the core members of the No White Savior team. And they made this little film a couple of weeks ago about how they've been carrying on their work throughout the COVID pandemic. So cue that film, please, Carl.
Hi, guys. This is the No White Savior team. I'm Olivia.
I'm Wendy.
I'm Kelsey. And here you're seeing the team that makes all this magic. So No White Savior is an NGO based in Uganda, and our main focus is decolonizing mission and development works. And in this work, we have three solid areas that we work on: education, advocacy, and
action. If you want to know more about what we do, who we are, the different partner projects that we've worked with, kindly go check out our website at nowhitesaviors.org.
And our social media handle, of course, Instagram, No White Saviors, Twitter, Kelsey.
Yeah, and Facebook. So it's all No White Saviors, and I'm sure that the folks with the conference are going to share that information with you as well. So please check it out, reach out to us, tell us how you feel about the video. We want to hear from you. Today we wanted to talk to you guys a little bit more about things that we've learned leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic that have helped us continue to do work that's committed to justice and committed to seeing tangible action happening within the communities that we work in and that our partner projects work in. So one of the biggest things, I think, one of the biggest strengths in the work that we do is the platform that we've grown on social media. A lot of the work that we do, most of it comes from people finding us on our Instagram account, our Twitter, or our Facebook page. And through finding us and learning and understanding the work that we do, people have reached out to have us do online lectures, to have us speak on panels, to have us do consultations. There have been so many different opportunities, not only to grow our work and our impact, but also to generate income, which is huge we can't operate with no funding. We have an office, we have a team that need to live, we have lawyer fees, legal fees, so many different things that we need to pay for. So being able to generate income still during COVID-19 has been huge. And I know a lot of people have been impacted by that. So I think the strategy of being able to work remotely and being able to still organize and mobilize with the online community that we've built globally has been huge.
Yeah. So I would say there's been a lot of people that have been doing work, but because in the first place before COVID-19 their work wasn't online as such, they found a much more bigger challenge to shifting their work to come online. But I would say with our team, this has been a very easy process for us because in the first place we were already working online. We are who we are because of social media. We have managed to use social media as a tool to transform the different work that we do in anti-racism, in advocating for justice. So we haven't really been affected in terms of how we push the message to its intended audience when it comes to this pandemic, and we are really grateful for that. We don't take it for granted in any way.
We're still educating.
However, in some ways we've also been affected because we do advocacy on the ground, and with the recent fundraising that we did for our partner projects, it was so hard for us to give them these funds so that they would buy food for the different beneficiaries, because the government set up a very, very tight law against it. Anyone got giving out food or something will go on for a murder case. So that has also really hindered our access to the ground, to the community, and also our partner projects reaching out. But as you know, with this work, there is risks involved. You have to risk. So we've got ways around it to see that people actually receive these things, though it is risky, like I've said, but still with our work, we're always working under risks and pushing. And also in this period, we've also had issues accessing documents because with our work, our office is closed, of course, and we still, as I told you, work on legal cases, and most of these documents are in the office. And we've had cases in the United States, and you all know very well that the systems there are more advanced. They can do online court sessions, which we cannot do in Uganda. So this has also hindered our work, that we cannot provide lawyers what they need at the moment. We can't give them all these documents. So you see that this is delaying the process and also delaying work. And also now we can't record podcasts because our podcast equipment is in our office. And we can't access the building. So this is also tying our work a little bit backwards, because through our podcast, we push on the message to people around the world. But
and now would be a good time for people to be listening to podcast sessions, because everyone is at home. They don't really know what to do with themselves with all this time that they have.
And there's so much content we could cover, like different cases that have come up and things that we we really wanted the podcast to be a space where we could dive deeper in, and now
and also with our work, it's a constant, we are constantly investigating on different issues, but right now you see that people are sending in cases that need to be investigated, but we cannot move, we cannot go to the field, we cannot, and this is hindering our work really, because we want to be able to advocate for the justice of these people that we feel have been oppressed and exploited. So that makes our work difficult at the moment, but as Wendy said, that we are grateful that we still have a community that is supportive in the work that we are doing even during COVID, and I think that is a leaf that people should borrow, that through social media we can push for change, and we can see the things that we want to see come out of this change.
So good, Liz.
Yeah, I think COVID-19, for us to be particular here in Uganda, has reflected on how much, when you are doing justice and advocacy work, how that could be tied into partisan politics, that as a group we cannot deliver the message about justice, about advocating for people, without someone saying, oh, you are being political, or you're supporting the current political party. So COVID has hindered this in a way that if the government says that you are not to be found distributing out food to people because the government thinks you are luring people in terms of votes or anything. So even if you are not, that's not your intention, and your intention is basically to help people, you cannot help people because, like Liv said, you would be charged for murder or anything. So
that's a lot. That's a huge barrier.
It is.
And I'm sure they have their reasons, but at the same time, it's creating a lot of barriers to people getting the help they need, because we know that there aren't the kind of safety nets, there's not unemployment for people. And as many barriers as there do exist in other countries in the Western world, there are no, there's unemployment and things and protections in place that if people are without jobs, there's some ways to help them and interventions to help them. And here, there really isn't any funds available. There aren't funds available or programs available for people.
We don't have that. We don't have those programs. And then you see that so many people, the way of life is daily income. Someone goes to the market and sells a few little things here and there to get for their family food. But and that is a huge, because we, as a country, there has not been a strategic plan for COVID-19, and it is really challenging when it comes to also our work, because we are working in systems that already,
could you first pause?
So during the COVID-19, we've seen it's exposed so many things, and the things that we always talk about on this platform, on our Instagram as No White Saviors, and we end up being called radical reputational terrorists because we are speaking to the truth of things which are happening in the world. So I am happy to for Wendy to really break down these things that we have seen now reflecting in the light, and they're always in line with what we are talking about on our platform.
Perfect. As a team, we have constantly talked about anti-Blackness, and people have thought otherwise. They've thought, it's not the case, but I think with the current pandemic, it has exposed how anti-Blackness is no longer an abstract concept. For instance, you will look at all the newspaper headlines and how Western media houses are projecting these huge masses in Africa, how Africa is doomed, or how Africa is not prepared for this. Kelsey and another of our extended family member, Caleb Okereke, wrote an article on this on Al Jazeera. And they were basically outlining how this is not the case, how the world cannot take in the mere fact that Africa is able to combat these, or Black people are, actually good at doing this. Let's talk about China. The recent news wave on how Black people were being evicted from their homes because they were speculating that
there's some few cases brought from the African continent, and they were accusing African immigrants or African expats living in China of bringing a new wave of corona.
And they were not only abusing, but they were actually beating them. They were torturing them.
Violence against
kicking them out, saying you're not allowed in this restaurant.
Saying you can't hop on public transport or anything.
Even buying things from the supermarket. They had no food, but they had the money. So our people turned into beggars in these countries, not because they wouldn't afford, but because no one was there to serve them.
And many couldn't leave even if they wanted to because of travel restrictions.
Yeah, and I think also the obsession of death in Africa by, it was clearly by the Bill Gates Foundation that you expect 10 million Africans to die. Wow. That was something that turned the world, especially on the African continent. It was something that we had to think about and say, so you expect Africans to die, 10 million? And after they die, you bring the vaccine to test on our children before you test on your own people.
But guess what? This has been vice versa. I mean, look at how Uganda as a country has handled the pandemic vis-a-vis where Kelsey comes from.
US, I'm from the US, yep.
Exactly. So it proves that everything negative, everything bad should only be attributed to Black people, and anything good and anything positive should be attributed to white people. And this is what we are constantly engaging.
Who are the experts? Who has the solution? Who's going to deal with this the right way?
Yeah.
It's because so many, Uganda is dealing with this so much better than the United States. And people don't want to acknowledge that. There's always an excuse. Oh, it's because of low test rates. Oh, it's because of warm weather. Or there's always a different reason than saying, no, actually, there are a lot of African governments who have done really well at addressing this and understanding that because of fragile health systems, something that I think this entitlement and this sense of superiority that we are untouchable in the US is very dangerous.
Yeah, it is.
So I think as a team, the general perspective is that we have been affected in one way or another, but we are happy that our work was already online. And we are able to do what we love, to do the things that we are passionate about, even through this pandemic.
We are working.
As individuals, we have personal things that have been going on within us. And as a team, we've been able to come together on several occasions to share and how we are able to deal with this.
Yeah, it's been important. I think people should understand that Uganda has some of the tightest, most strict lockdowns. So Olivia and Wendy are right now, this is my apartment, and they walked here. So Wendy's from much further away than Olivia, and she has to walk a little over an hour to get here. So we don't do it every day, but because there's no private vehicles allowed right now. And so a lot of that, I think, is why, as challenging as that has been for us as a team, it's been clear that is one of the biggest reasons the cases have stayed low, is that there's been such tight restrictions, and the Ugandan government's been very proactive.
And also, I think, Kelsey, just add something little about that, is that when you see us walk these distances to come and do this work, it's because we love it. And we want to do this work. We have the passion for the work, because we are not complaining much as we are walking these distances, but we still want to continue and engage and do the work to show that we are in this because we want it. No one is forcing us to do this work, and it makes us happy. So we are here fully and continuing to support people who follow us on our social media, continuing to support our projects, and feel free to check our Instagram.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for being here. Bye.
Hey, every contribution is making me dance. Apologies for the little glitches during that, internet. But obviously everything will be available in full on Friday. If you missed any bits, you can catch it up then.
Yeah. So big shout out and thank you to No White Saviors. And we just wanted to clarify that this video was recorded a couple of weeks ago before the killing of George Floyd and the recent Black Lives Matter protest. Did you know, James, that No White Saviors have only been going for 2 years?
But they've got like 350,000 followers on Instagram. That's ridiculous.
I know. And then also we found out that yesterday they were arrested at a Black Lives Matter demo in Uganda, along with 13 other people, despite abiding to social distance regulations. But we did hear that they were released last night on bond, just in time for the curfew. And they are carrying on doing their amazing work. So they have a fundraiser out right now, and that's basically to create a liberation library with lots of radical books in it, and that will be the first one of its kind in Uganda. They also want to get a lawyer as a permanent member of their team, and they want to, because they need to do that in order to carry on challenging all of those legal cases. And they also want to get some money together to really work on the projects that they are trying to support in Uganda. So please support their fundraiser.
So you introduced me to this group, and I was really drawn to them, first of all, by they've just got really good graphics, and they use social media in a really, really smart, effective way, and I really love that. But as I really dug down into what they're doing, but also watching this video afterwards, yeah, like this thing about enacting Black liberation politics and like African self-determination, and also that they work collaboratively, so they're not like, yeah, just this, I don't know how to describe it, but they are speaking so directly with this speaking truth to power that they are so unafraid of calling bullshit out, that I just love that about them. It's so amazing.
And also the partnerships, I think, the partnership between these Black women who are at the center of it and their white allies, I think it's really amazing. And it gives us all a lot of inspiration in terms of how we can and should be working together for equality, equity, justice, all of those things, simple things in life.
Yeah, simple.
So we've also been chatting over the last week about property damage and Black Lives Matter. Do you remember that?
No. Yeah, I do, because we obviously, the Home Secretary here in the UK, Priti Patel, has called for these like super harsh punishments for those beautiful, beautiful heroes and warriors that threw the Colson statue into the sea and
the harbour.
That's linked to the sea. But like, yeah, there's something really contrasting about that, and obviously coming up to the anniversary of Grenfell.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we actually need to just talk about things like Grenfell and justice for the 72 people who were killed in that disaster.
The fact that those activists are, being threatened by the Home Secretary, yet we know there were people directly responsible for the murder of those predominantly Black and brown and disabled people in Grenfell. Where's the justice for them? Like, as Stormzy keeps saying, where's the money for Grenfell? It's so hypocritical.
Yeah. So this year on the 14th of June, it will be the 3rd anniversary of the Grenfell Tower disaster. So please join the Justice for Grenfell Remembrance event. That's going to be on the 14th of June. And it's going to be an online event in order that we keep social distancing. So please check Facebook for details, or I think you'll be able to find a little link to that in the YouTube chat. And yeah, you're forever in our hearts.
I need something like that's gonna. There's a lot of big feels. There's a lot of big feels. A lot of big feels.
I think I know what you need. I think I know what you need. Yeah. I think you might need some amazing art. Shall I tell you about some amazing art?
Please do.
A little intro to an amazing art. Yeah. The makers of the amazing art. So last year, we lost one of the all-time greats of live art and performance art, and that was Catherine Arignello, who, together with Aaron Williamson, formed the genre-defining disabled avant-garde. So they redefined, mocked, satirized, and called out both non-disabled people and mainstream disability arts organizations here in the UK.
So let's join disabled avant-garde in making amazing art.
Aaron and Catherine are two very special people, and together they make amazing art. Aaron is profoundly deaf, and Catherine is confined to a wheelchair. Despite their severe handicaps, these two courageous people have formed a strong bond while taking art therapy classes over the years. Aaron is unable to hear a pin drop, but this doesn't stop him. Here we see him with an ingenious invention that helps him to draw beautiful pictures. Sadly, when Aaron was only 14 years of age, he was afflicted with a terrible condition called sensorineural deafness, which cruelly took away all of his hearing and made him permanently deaf. Despite this tragic loss, Aaron has been attending the art therapy classes, and this has helped Aaron to build his confidence under such tragic circumstances.
Can't get off the board.
Here we see them in their life drawing classes, and despite Catherine having no movement, she still perseveres and is making a lot of progress. When Catherine was first born, everyone thought she was normal until she showed no signs of crawling. After a few months, she was diagnosed with a fatal crippling disease called spinal muscular atrophy. As the years have progressed, Catherine's condition has deteriorated. However, she finds her strength in the art therapy classes she attends each week. Aaron and Catherine first started making great art together in their early 20s, and to this day they continue to make amazing art. They are very excited because they get to run a charity stall at the Brick Lane Art Car Boot Fair and at Watch This Space at the National Theatre. This is an incredible achievement, and they are so happy and are actively participating in everything they do. This has inspired them to come up with some exciting new additions to their work. Catherine and Aaron are aware of the health risks with smoking, but decided that a limited edition set of ashtrays would be a popular addition to the stall, since lots of artists still smoke fags. Besides, they were comparatively easy to make. The jam was the trickiest thing to make for the stall, but in the end they decided just to use ready-made jam from Tesco. Catherine had heard that ready-made is a very arty concept associated with Marcel Duchamp, so it all fitted perfectly, as there would be a lot of arty people coming to the fair. Nowadays, modern artists don't always manufacture their own art, even if they do have the idea for it. Aaron and Catherine want to keep up to date, and when they attended the embroidery class, they realised that they didn't have the skills or patience to do much in that area. However, they managed to raise a little money through charity to pay some assistants to realise their embroidery concepts. For example, stitching the initials DAG onto handkerchiefs. Lucy is Catherine's special companion, and Catherine and her little canine friend are inseparable. Lucy plays a prominent role on the stall, and Catherine and Aaron soon realise that she attracts the crowds, and by allowing the public to pet her, this will encourage people to give generously. Over the years, it has been very challenging for them, as they have faced many difficulties due to their severe disabilities. Making art has not been easy, yet this doesn't stop them, and they don't focus on what they can't do, but rather focus on what they can do. With a large pencil strapped to the wheelchair, they can create the most wonderfully delicate drawings that are a joy to look at. And in addition, by strapping on a large pencil to a specially designed headpiece, Aaron is now able to draw incredibly intricate drawings. The art therapy classes give them a deep pride and satisfaction in what they have worked on, and there are no limits. Catherine says that she is jolly and gay, and from this documentary we can see that she is making the most of her life. Aaron says he loves art, and he also likes writing short, saucy stories, which gives him a little bit of cash towards his art therapy classes. People like Aaron and Catherine are an inspiration to us all, and this short portrayal of their lives demonstrates how, despite their tragic circumstances, they manage to make amazing art.
I've seen that so many times, and it still makes me laugh every time. Thank you to Disabled Avant-Garde, but also shout out to Tracy. Big love to Tracy.
Thank you, Tracy. James, so can you drill down into that a bit?
I'll stop laughing. Yeah. So obviously, like my disability is different to Catherine and Aaron's, but I still get this. Even now, I still get this super paternalistic rubbish, and this still like, you're mad, therefore you're stupid rubbish. And I've been to like art spaces that are like similar to what appears in Amazing Art, and it's just this total uncritical stuff. So I just love this rinsing of it, and yeah, this idea that disabled people can't make radical, conceptually brilliant, socially amazing work. They're just calling that out in such a funny way. So yeah, I just love it that they're doing, and they did that, and that Aaron's still doing this as well. Yeah, it's brilliant.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just so, they just
don't give a fuck. I swore, I'm sorry, but yeah.
Daytime TV. So moving on to something a little bit less sweary, I just wanted to mention something on the reading list, which is from Sins Invalid, and that is 10 points for disability justice. If you don't know it, then please read it. It's great. It's not very long, but it means a lot.
So next week is our last episode.
Yeah, I feel sad about that. It's been really good to share this space with you, James. James? 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 Oh, James is smiling. I thought he doesn't feel emotions.
I do feel emotions. They're just like, you know, they're a little delayed. So in like 2 weeks, I'll have a big cry.
Okay.
But, some of the artists confirmed for next week's episode are already in the episode guide, so you can have a look at that and get excited.
Including migrants in culture. Oop, there we are.
And
so
before we go,
yes, we're going to play out with some words of wisdom from the performance maker and legendary maker of stories, Neil Bartlett.
So Neil is an actual living legend. He's won a Perrier Award. He's a hugely successful opera director, and he was the director of the Lyric Hammersmith Theatre during its golden period of pushing the boundaries of both performance and theatre. And he's made this beautiful little film. We invited Neil to reflect on his experience of surviving the initial horrors of the HIV/AIDS pandemic, and the wisdom that was passed to him and the wisdom that he now passes on. And it's a really gentle but beautiful way to play out this episode.
So before we play that film, we just wanted to say thank you to all of our contributors, and thank you for the audience for watching today. And we're going to be back next week for the last episode of With For About 2020. Same time, same space.
Please stay super spicy.
And see you next week. Cue Neil's film, please, Carl.
Hello, welcome to my workspace on a rainy Sunday afternoon in May 2020. 3 things about me. My name is Neil Bartlett, and I'm an author, and I'm a theatre director, and I'm a sometime performer. Other important things about me, I've lived all my life here in the UK, and I'm 61 and I'm queer. And those 2 things put together are really important. Being 61 means that I've lived through a virus before. I'd already been making my work as an artist for several years when the first wave of the HIV/AIDS pandemic hit my country in the early 1980s. And it also means, this thing of being 61, that I've lived through the most incredible changes. When I was a young man, as a queer young man, and I'm talking about when I was 14, 15, I was illegal and I was in danger on a daily basis. And now, what can I tell you? Well, today is the 31st anniversary of when my partner and I got together, and my dad's just called me to wish us a happy anniversary. That's how much the world has changed. So those 2 things, having lived through an epidemic and also being part of my country's revolutionary queer journey, those are the 2 biggest contexts for what I want to try and share with you today. Okay, preamble over. I think we are all familiar with the idea that in our life or in our work, a little history can help. The idea that it's great to be inspired by stories of survival and struggle. So for instance, in my own queer history that I've been talking about, if you want to know about what it's like to be in a social and emotional lockdown, if you want to know what it's like to live with headlines about thousands of deaths, what it's like to visit overworked hospitals, what it's like to organise community fight back in times of crisis. Hey, I can tell you lots of great stories about the 1980s. But the important thing for me about those stories would be, how can they really help? I mean, by which I mean, how can they help us to devise strategies, not just cheer us up on the bad days? So I want to give you some tips, some things that I've learned from experience about how I think things from the past can really help. My biggest tip would be, if you want to learn from previous cultural models, if you want to learn from history, don't just watch a documentary. That can be a good place to start sometimes, although not often. What you have to do is not watch something on a screen, but to talk to the people who were there. So for instance, if you want to organise a street intervention, if you want to organise a protest campaign, whether that's very local or national or international, or you want to know how to reinvent your sex life in a crisis, for sure there's going to be an older queen in your town who will have done that. Or maybe there will be a member of another crisis experience community in your town who you could get to, because this model of talking to people can apply to people from all different communities, not just from my own community. And I think you have to actually physically get in the room with someone, or at least FaceTime them if we're all stuck in our rooms for too long. You have to talk to people. You can't just read about them. So that's my radical simple tip. Don't read about history, get in the room with history. Also, second tip, I want you to think about the people who you need to talk to may be exactly the kind of people who you were brought up never to talk to, or perhaps never to even see. So for instance, in those crisis years of the AIDS epidemic that I'm talking about in the 1980s, my great mentors and educators were working class drag queens who I invited to join me in my work. And trust me, I was not brought up to hang out with working class drag queens. Another tip for you, please bear in mind that the people whose expertise you need right now might be a generation or three older than you. A lot of our habitual thinking as artists or just as citizens is that young people are always our innovators. Well, some communities, like mine for instance, have generations of 60, 70, 80-year-olds who very specifically are experienced innovators. They're very experienced not just in surviving, but in creating radical artworks and radical social change. The drag queens I worked with in the 1980s helped me very specifically because they were of an older generation. They'd already lived through a lifetime of trouble, so they knew about living with fear, they knew about refusing fear, they knew about working to change stuff, the stuff that you need to change in order to survive. So those are my tips for learning from history. Get in the room, ask yourself, who are the people you really need to talk to? For instance, in my own working practice, on the last big performance project I made called 24 Hours of Peace, I spent a lot of time seeking out and getting in the room with people who worked in local government, Quakers, and Muslims. I had not gone out and sought to be in the room with those people ever before, and hey presto, I really found help. Also remember I said, think about whether you need to be talking to young people or do you need to be talking to old people like me, because maybe old people in certain circumstances are the innovators. I really want to reinforce that point about being in the room with people. A small story. In the late 1980s, in the darkest days of the AIDS epidemic, I used to hang out in a pub in London called the London Apprentice, and on the way home I walked through the sex workers beat in a big market in East London, and there on my way home I used to occasionally bump into a transsexual, or we didn't use that word then actually, a drag queen, man, woman. Anyway, I used to bump into this wonderful human being called Blanche, who was a sex worker. She was working the trucks in Spitalfield Market. And one night I was really down. I hadn't scored. I hadn't got any money left. And she gave me a bit of a talking to. And she said, you know what your trouble is, darling? You haven't learnt that you should never use the word later. Never let anybody tell you that you'll be safe later, or you'll be equal later, or you'll be happy later. Always use the word now. That night changed my life. That's why you have to be in the same space as people, because you're going to learn as much from their bodies and their voices, from their attitude, from the shapes that they throw, as anything that you're ever going to watch in a documentary. I hope that's been useful. Forgive me for rambling. That's how I share my ideas. If you want to know more about me or to be in touch with me, my name is Neil Bartlett. Google my name, you'll find my website. Write to me. Thanks for listening, and bye-bye.